Hello and welcome back. This time I'm here with a painting tutorial on how to paint Space Marine Salamanders. Salamanders were always one of my favorite legions. Not only do they have really cool lore, but they also look really great. And obviously I wanted to paint some for myself. But I also wanted to do a good job on them. And because I never really found the right green recipe, it took quite a while until I figured that out. And that's why I'm doing this painting tutorial, because I think I found something I really like and maybe you like it as well. I'm saying that here like I reinvented the wheel on painting salamanders. That's totally not true. It's quite similar to the GW painting style and painting recipe, but I just did a few changes with a few other different colors that I think really helps them stand out a bit more or stand out a bit less depending on who you ask. And yeah. Maybe you like it as well, and maybe you can take something away from it. As you can see here on the Sergeant, I also did quite a lot of freehands on them, and that's going to be a separate video because I think these flame freehands are applicable to a lot of different styles and a lot of different miniatures, so I want to keep that separate. Over a black primer, I started with base coating the model, and for the green I used VALLEJO black green, which is a great color because it covers really well and it's quite desaturated. And because this will remain in some of the recesses and the darkest parts of the model, I chose this color as opposed to something like Caliban green from GW because of that desaturation. And at this point I also primed the rest of the models. For the black I used GW Abaddon black, for the gold base coat I used Rhinox hide, and all the grey parts got a coat of London grey from VALLEJO. But honestly, any grey, black or brown colors are fine, just use what you're used to because they are going to cover it up eventually. And then I shaded the grey parts, mainly the under armor, the undersuit, with null oil just to get some black in the recesses. Can also use thin black paint for this. And I did the same for the leather parts, just stippled a bit of grey around the edges and washed it with black just to tone it down. And here you can see me doing some kind of color fade on the shoulder pad. That's just to indicate some highlights. I just used some London grey for the highest parts and then tried to wet blend it into the black on the underside of the shoulder pad. You don't really need to do that, I just like the look of it. Most of it's going to be covered up with a decal anyways, so don't bother too much about a clean fade. On the other shoulder pad I have this dragon icon. It's a shoulder pad from Cromlech I think, and I just base coated that with Deck Tan from VALLEJO. It's a really great covering paint. It's not quite white but white enough to indicate white. Washed it with null oil and highlighted it again with Deck Tan, and that's about it. On the other shoulder pad I'm going to apply the decal. This is one of the decals from the Salamanders upgrade kit from GW, and I'm going to apply one of the numbers over that decal. If you don't want to spend all that money for the decal sheets, you can freehand that symbol, it's not too difficult. And here you can see the base coated metallics. For the silver I used Lead Belcher from GW, which is just a dark silver. And as a base coat for the golds I used Scale 75's Decayed Metal, which is a great color, it covers really well and it's a great undercoat for gold paints later on. The silver metallics I then washed with null oil, and that's all I'm going to do. Here you can already see me highlighting the black. I'm going to do a simple edge highlight, one thicker with a dark grey, one smaller with a thinner grey, and then do some scratches with the lighter grey as well. And then dot the edges. Here you can see how it looks in a close-up picture. And now onto the green armor. So when I said at the beginning that it's not going to be too different from the GW style, this is because I'm going to use GW's Warpstone Glow, I think it's called. And that's the main color they use for the armor on their salamanders. I love the tone of that paint, and I really couldn't find any other brand and paint tone that fits salamanders as good as this does in my opinion. But it's also a bit too bright for my taste if you are going to base coat the whole model with it. So I'm just going to use it as a highlight color, at first mixed with black green. And this is also going to play into the strengths of this paint, because it's actually quite a shit paint in terms of coverage. It's quite transparent and it's a bit gloopy, so it's really difficult to get a clean base coat with it, but it's great for volumetric highlighting because of that transparency. And that's going to be the main process of painting this armor. Check the model in the light where light gets reflected on the armor, mix in a bit of WARPSTONE glow into the black green and highlight the armor up. Here you can see after the first layer this won't be too noticeable, it won't be that strong of an effect. You probably need to do about 2 to 3 layers with every paint mix to get some nice coverage with it. And with a bit of patience this can be quite an enjoyable process. And here you can see the results of this second layer of this highlight stage. And this is also going to be the process for the next layers. So you're going to have to tweak the color ratio a bit. So put in a little more of the WARPSTONE glow, so it gets a bit brighter, a bit greener, and go over the whole model the same way you did before. Just catch the raised areas, the volumes, and yeah, just the areas you really like to brighten up. And be aware that this will kind of be your last coat. You're going to have to establish your main color in this step. So if you want the miniature to be brighter green, more of the WARPSTONE glow, you have to cover a larger area. And if you just want it to have these high contrasting reflecting areas, you are going to have to restrict yourself to smaller areas on the top surfaces. As you can see here, I tend to feather out the highlights a bit. This is to blend them in with the surface underneath, but also to create like a brushed steel look. Won't be too noticeable at the end, and I don't think you want it to be too noticeable, but that's just how I like to do it. It's a bit easier, a bit simpler, and if you create some brush strokes they won't be as noticeable if they go with the flow of the model. And the next step is going to be basically WARPSTONE glow on itself. I put in a little black green, and that's just to desaturate the color a bit. That's just because I don't really like this toxic green color too much. And with a little bit of black green in it, it just takes the edge of that brightness, and I prefer that look. And as before, just re-highlight the highlighted surfaces with this. I also did an edge highlight, a thicker edge highlight on most of the surfaces, just to, in a way, just to prepare the edges for the actual edge highlight. I would also really recommend focusing with this color mix on the really raised surfaces like I do here on the helmet, because these are the parts that really stand out later on, and these are the parts you want the eye to be drawn to at the end when you have an army or a few models on display. It's not the feet you want people to look at, well, at least for me it's not the feet. It's more like the faces and the helmets and the uppermost surfaces where the actual light would also hit. For me, this is the part that is most fun, because the model really comes together at this point, and it's really exciting to discover all the edges of the model, to highlight them up and to get all the detail out of it. Here's the final look. I'm really pleased with that. That's a look I like for my Salamanders. It's not too bright, it's not too dark, not like the 30k scheme. It's totally the 40k GW green, but it's not that really flat green they use on their models. And here you can also see others I did. So this one is way brighter, also with bright edge highlight, and on this one I used way less of the WARPSTONE glow, so it's way darker. So you can see just how different they can look. And yeah, here's the example of the GW one, which is just really flat, and it's a nice color, but I don't particularly like it. And now onto our favorite part of the model, which is going to be edge highlighting. So I'm going to use GW WARBOSS green and VALLEJO lime green for the highlights. I use lime green for the final highlight just because it's not as bright as Citadel mood green, which is what they use for their box art. And I use the WARBOSS green for the same reason. So you might think bright green needs to be highlighted with another bright green, but I think the WARBOSS green is a crucial step in making the Salamanders look the way I like them, because I like them to be not as flashy, but still have this bright green as the main color, and I think the edge highlights do a big part in that. Here you can see how it looks with this first layer of edge highlighting. At this stage I picked out most of the edges and not just the upper surfaces like we are going to do with the lime green, and this is just to define all the areas. And here you're going to see me doing the lime green. Yeah, as I said, I'm only going to do the most raised surfaces, the most raised edges, and I'm also going to keep them thinner so I don't cover up the WARBOSS green as an edge highlight on itself. And this is going to help to make the light reflections even clearer and have the sharpest highlights really stand out. And here you can see a close-up picture of a different model where you can clearly see which edges I picked out and which edges I left with the lime green. And this brings us to the final step, which is going to be a dot highlight with ice yellow. Can also use some ivory or some different kind of bright green color to pick out where the edges meet. You don't really have to do it, but I like how it looks and it defines all the corners and the edges of the model. And as a final step, I do some battle damage. I just use WARBOSS green for this and put in little scratches, small dots and dings in the armor, mostly on the lower surfaces, as you can see in this picture. Just keep them nice and small and tidy, and it will look good. Oh yeah, I totally forgot about the gold. So over the decayed metal base coat, I just cover the gold with Dwarven gold, which is a darker gold from scale 75. I think it looks good in comparison with the green. And then I'm going to shade that gold with GW Wildwood, which is a contrast paint. And it's a bit darker than something like Agrax Earthshade, but it doesn't matte the gold down that much. As with the green, I don't like these totally bright gold colors, these yellow gold colors, and that's why I darken it down so much and give it that beaten up look. I just prefer that for my salamanders. And that's it. This is how I paint my salamanders. I hope you could take something away from it. As I said in the beginning, if you want to see how I paint these flame-free hands, go and check out the next video, which is going to be linked in the description and probably at the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it and I hope you check out the next video, and yeah, thanks for watching.